Hi everyone, good evening. So today we'll have a short demo on BMC Remedy Training. So going forward, so let me give a quick introduction to myself. I'm having 10 plus years of experience in BMC Remedy and ITSM suite of applications. So I work for many various MNCs and handle multiple clients both onshore and offshore. So during this 10 years of experience, I have played a lot of roles like starting with support agent and now I'm architect. So in between, I have played a lot of roles, handled multiple customers, worked on multiple business use cases, and worked on multiple business tools. And my main, the major skill set which I have is BMC Remedy and ITSM suite of applications. So as part of today's demo, I'll have a quick introduction on the BMC Remedy architecture as well as the I will be covering two topics basically. One is the BMC Remedy architecture and the multi-threaded architecture. So before going into the actual BMC Remedy architecture, so let me give you a quick introduction of what is tier architecture. So in the market, we often hear something called two-tier architecture, three-tier architecture, and n-tier architecture. So let's understand that first, and then we go into our BMC Remedy architecture. So in software engineering, multi-tier architecture, which we often referred as an n-tier architecture, or multi-layered architecture, is simply a client-server architecture in which presentation layer, application processing layer, and the data management layer. So all these three layers or tiers are physically separated. And the most widespread use of multi-tier architecture is nothing but the three-tier architecture. If you take any application in the industry today, the most often used architecture is the three-tier architecture. So using n-tier application architecture, it helps developers who can create a flexible and reusable applications. So by segregating an application into different tiers, so developers can acquire the option of modifying or adding any specific layer instead of reworking the entire application. For example, if there is some issue or if there is any bug in particular layer, let's say application layer, so developer has an option to just touch that layer and do modification only for the application layer. So there is no purpose of going to presentation layer or the data story layer and disturb the existing code. So that is the major flexibility what you have in n-tier architecture. A three-tier architecture is typically composed of three things: presentation tier, a domain logic tier, and a data storage tier. Now let's understand the what is actually the three-tier architecture is. So three-tier architecture is a client-server software architecture pattern in which user interface is nothing but presentation tier, functional process logic is also known as the business rules, and computer data storage and data access layers are developed and maintained as independent modules and most often maintained on separate platforms. It's not like all three has to be on a single platform. So we maintain three different tiers in different platforms, which give us flexibility of maintenance of the application or the product. Apart from the usual advantage of this modular software with well-defined interfaces, the three-tier architecture is intended to allow any of the three tiers to be upgraded or replaced independently instead of disturbing the other layers. For example, let's say we are having a Microsoft operating system for business processing layer. Let's say there Microsoft has released some, or you can say patches, and that is only for the Microsoft server. But our database server is on different platform. Let's say Linux. So now instead of disturbing the data tier or the Linux layer, we can only just go to the presentation layer and just add that patch and restart. So this will not impact the product at all. What are the changes happen? So that will be implemented independently, and it gives more flexibility of the maintenance. Okay. So typically the user interface runs on a desktop PC or workstation and uses a standard graphical user interface. And the functional process logic that may consist one or more separate modules running on a workstation or an application server. And the last one, the RDBMS or the data tier. So it is nothing but the database server or the mainframe one that contains the computer data storage logic. So these are the three different components which involved in your three-tier architecture. So this is about three-tier architecture. Considering that it's well understood, let me get into our actual topic of BMC Remedy architecture. So BMC Remedy is a three-tier architecture, and that you can easily identify by seeing the image on the screen. So all these three tiers are marked in three different colors, and it is mentioned there: presentation, business processing, data storage. So let's understand one by one. The first one is the presentation tier. So this is the topmost level of the application user interface. So it's nothing but the user interface. This is the topmost layer in your three architecture of a remedy. So this is the place where users can face the application or access the application and communicate with the application. It basically have a user interface, and we have something called client tools. So before 8.x of Remedy, you have something called BMC Remedy client tool, with which users used to interact with the BMC Remedy. After that, we have a web layer which came into picture, replacing the thick client or Remedy user client. And now you can access BMC Remedy through browser, either through desktop or the tablet or mobile phone. So all these things are nothing but the client tools, and these are the source of accessing the presentation layer. So the presentation layer is nothing but the front end facing for end users who use the product of BMC Remedy. It's not only for Remedy, any other product. So this will be the presentation layer, and you have some source to access it. So next layer is the application layer, or we can also refer it as business logic layer or the business processing layer or middle tier. So this layer coordinates the application, process the commands, it makes logical decisions, evaluate all the conditions which came in and perform and provide the results, and also performs different calculations, which is design. It's basically the actual heart of your application. So all your processing, all your coding, whatever the logic you write for your applications or the business models, everything sits in this business process. So it is also a layer which interacts with both presentation as well as the data storage. The main task of this business processing is it takes the input from presentation, process it, and if anything required to be sent to data layer, it will send to the data tier. And if data tier gives back any output, it takes back to business processing, again convert it and send back to the presentation. And one more thing about the presentation is that it will be a middle layer where it will do some translation, because different client tools will have a different way of communication. Like let's say the browser will have a different code, mobile will have a different code. So all this will be translated, and the data will be sent to the business processing layer. And business processing is the one who does the actual job, and then it will send. If data has to be processed, then it goes to the data storage layer. So if you see in the diagram here, so in business processing there are two components here. So this is specific to your remedy. It is mid-tier and the AI system server. So mid-tier is the one which actually takes the input from the presentation, do the translation, and then send to the AI system server. AI system server is our business processing engine here. This is the one which has a different components like approval, DSO, email, RESTful API, FTS, etc. Each process will do its own task, and it will do all the processing, all the validations, permission models, access controls. Everything will be done in this business processing layer using the component called AI system server. It is nothing but a remedy platform. Now, the third one is data layer or the data storage. So this is the place where the actual data stores, and no one can directly connect to the data tier. When you are using a BMC Remedy application or ITSM suite of applications, you are only intended to access the data through presentation and then business processing and then data storage. You cannot directly connect to the database, because all your access validations, everything happens in the business processing layer, and then only data will be displayed. For example, let's say there are 50 records, and as per your access, there are two users, user A and user B. If user A is having a limited access to access only 10 records, and user B is having a access to access all the 50 records, then this access restriction and the validation happens at the business processing layer. And as per the access control, it will only fetch the 10 records for user A, and it will fetch all the 50 records for the user B. So this is a level of processing. It happens in the business processing layer. And if user A inputs some data and user A want to save the data, again it validates whether user has access to store the data in the system or not. If yes, the data will be persisted in the data storage, and then in data storage will return back the ID. For example, if it has to give some unique ID, so that unique ID will be again sent back to the presentation. So this data tier will include data persistence mechanism, which is nothing but your database servers or the file servers, etc., and the data access layer that will encapsulate the persistence mechanism and exposes the data. So the data access layer should provide an API to the application tier that will expose the method of managing the stored data with exposing or creating dependencies into the data storage mechanism. So avoiding dependencies on the storage mechanisms, it will allow for further updates or changes without the application tier getting affected by even not aware of the change. So that's how the complete processing happens in your remedy. So now going forward, so I'm extending the topic with something called multi-tier architecture. So hope you have understood all the layers of the BMC remedy architecture and the way the data gets processed in a remedy. So I'm not there are much more content for this architecture. So I'm not going into deep. So I'm just giving the brief introduction of the both the topics. Now coming back to the multi-threaded server architecture. So in simple language, what you can say is single thread multi. So there's something called single thread and multi-thread. So when a single request get processed at a time, then it is called single threaded architecture. If multiple requests gets processed at the same time, then it's called multi-threaded server architecture. In Remedy, you have an option to configure this. Either you want to go for a single threaded or multi-threaded. By default, we make it as a multi-threaded for the best performance. But if someone wants to make it, yes, there is an option to make it as a single threaded. Now let's understand what exactly it is. So if you see in the diagram here, the top layer, you can see these are the client tools. There are different client tools, browser clients, administrator clients like Developer Studio, and API programs, even the user tool. So all these clients comes here. Now, whenever a browser client comes into picture, so the data will be sent to the mid tier, and rest of the clients like Developer Studio, user tool, or any data import tool, all these are the thick clients. We call it as a thick client. So all the whatever the transaction that comes, it goes directly to the next level. So now, so once the request is ready here, the client layer, client tier, or the client level. So that the request, whatever the request that comes, it comes in the RPC program. Okay, the format is called RPC program. So each request that comes with a unique RPC ID, and there is something called dispatcher thread. You can call it as a bucket or the queue. So all the requests, because at a time, for example, there are 10 users in a team. So 5 users might access the same application at the same time, and they can request at the same time. So we cannot predict it because this is a web-based application and it can be used globally anywhere at any time. So let's say there are 10 requests came into this. So all this will be first parked into something called dispatcher thread or dispatcher. You can say call it as a bucket or a queue. So now once it comes to the dispatcher, there's something called queue number. So each RPC, each transaction will come in with a RPC ID, and based on that ID, so all the transaction comes into this dispatcher, and there is something called queues. So this is the major queue, and these are the sub queues. You can call it as a sub queues. Now each request will be separated or segregated based on the queue number. So each request will come in with this queue number, what you see here, 390603, 390602, 600. So all these are the unique queue numbers, and each request comes with this queue numbers. Based on this queue number, the dispatcher will segregate and send to the each individual queue. The reason is each type of request has its own property or its own way of execution. So if you say there's something called escalation queue, all time-based transaction will come into this escalation queue. When I say time-based, let's say I have an escalation which runs every day at 12 a.m. in the morning, and it will process all the requests which are pending. So then that is a time-based. And if you run that with the actual day-to-day transactions, then that will impact the system. So that's the reason there is a separate queue for it, and all those comes into the escalation. Similar way, there's something called admin queue. All admin-related activities, like you're developing some code or adding some backend data, like developing some forms, filters, other adding a field. All these things comes into the admin transactions, and those comes with the ID called 390600, and that will be segregated into admin queue. And now there is something called fast queue and list queue, where if any transaction that has to execute immediately, that comes to fast queue. If any transaction that requires ample time to process it, then that comes to the list queue. And there is something called private queue. For example, if you have your custom code, and if you want to run that in a separate queue without disturbing the existing out of the box queues, then you can design your own private queue, give some unique number. So there are number limits given by VMC, we have to give the number of the thread. I mean, you have to choose a number only from this and give a private key, and then you have to develop your code. So now once each transaction comes on its own queue, then as per the weightage given to the queues, those will be processed by something called worker thread. So these worker threads basically do the actual processing of the request, and if any data persistence or if any data fetch should happen, then it goes to the database and give back the result. This is about the multi-threaded server architecture, and there are much more details about this each individual queue, so that will be covered in actual Remedy training. Let's go to the next slide. So here, this is the course outline which we will be learning in this course structure. There are 3 modules and there are some subtopics. The first module, it will give all your introduction of the AI system, and what you can see all the detailed content here. Module 1, module 2, and next one is a module 3, and then 3 other topics, which is accessing your developer studio. It's nothing but the client tool which will be used for developing the Remedy code, and then understanding the access control. So this basically will be covered in module 1 itself, because it's important to understand the access control of any application at the start of the course itself. So I'll be moving this to the module 1, or the first topic, where you can understand the actual access controls for the BMC Remedy. And next one is there are a couple of out of the box applications available by developed and available by BMC. I'll be just giving you overview of those out of the box applications. There are a few add-on topics as part of the regular training classes. We'll be covering all the topics available, and if there are any doubts or any specific topic that needs to be discussed, we can just discuss on the fly, or I will also I'll be giving some more information, like what will be the next level of trainings available, like after this Remedy training. So what trainings will help you to boost your career or for improve your job search. And I will also just give a brief introduction of the what are the different out of the box modules available, and what are the new applications of the products available in the market which are related to the BMC Remedy or extension of the BMC Remedy. And also additional skills, we can discuss about the additional different skills which can make a difference from others. Like if someone knows only BMC Remedy and if someone knows the additional skills, so what difference it will make you in the industry. So that we'll be just discussing on that. And so this is the URL which you can be used for viewing all the content of the course. It's you can just go to the docs.bmc.com and you can search for whatever it will have everything. All the product content will be available in docs.bmc.com. This particular link will take you to the 9.1 Remedy course. I mean, the Remedy documentation. You don't need any other resources. Just go to this docs.bmc.com and you'll get all the content about the product. As part of this training, we'll be having 2 projects. So the first one will be the basic development activity, which will cover all the elements covered in the training. For example, let's say today if I discuss about forms or filters, so I'll be giving an exercise, and that will be kind of a continuation of every day. We'll be discussing about the elements. I will be making you to work on that, do some exercise, and then relate that to a next level of coding. So this is kind of the project one will start from the day 1, and all the topics or the coding elements which is learned has to be implemented by the student. Next one is the project 2. This is the actual product. So I'll be giving a custom application development. Either student can choose of their own interest and come up with the development, or I'll give one custom application, and student has to develop the application using all the whatever the coding details or whatever the coding elements learned in the complete course. So next one is what are the prerequisites required for setting up a lab. So here we'll be installing only BMC Remedy platform, because on a laptop, if you install more than Remedy, then it will completely screw up the laptop and it will make it slow. So we'll be just giving a software for Remedy. You'll be installing it, and you need high-speed internet and desktop or laptop to access to develop a course, to develop a coding BMC Remedy application, or to do some development activity. You don't need any internet, because as you are implementing in your local machine. But to connect to the training, yes, you need a high-speed internet and your desktop or laptop, and at least you need Windows 7 or more than that. You need a minimum 500 GB of hard disk and 16 GB memory and 4 CPU. So next one is a mock interviews. Yes, we'll be doing some mock interview after completion of the training course. So I'll be sharing few questions, and I will I'll be doing mock interviews for BMC Remedy, and according to the knowledge of the student, I'll be just extending that interviews. And if any tips are required or if anything needs to be brushed up, yes, I'll be suggesting in the mock interviews. Next one, certifications. So in BMC, you have three. The certifications are segregated into three different categories. First one, BMC Certified Associate. Next one, BMC Certified Professional, and BMC Certified Expert. So these are the categories available, and these are for each product. It's not specific to Remedy. For each product, you have these three type of categories, and according to the knowledge, you have to go for it. BMC certifications are very expensive. One cannot afford individually because it's too expensive and it's not required to go for it individually. If you are in a company and if company is sponsoring it, yes, you should go for BMC Remedy trainings. Sorry, trainings and the certification. So, and in the market, nobody can give the BMC Remedy certification, or nobody can do it. Only BMC can arrange for the certification. You have to be there will be a separate logins and a separate portal. You have to attend the session, and then you have to go for, after all, like 4 or 5 days of session, there'll be a certification program. You have to do it. Next, at the end of the 30 days training goes, so there'll be a course completion certificate from the MindMajix with your name on there. Okay, so that's about for today's demo, and thanks for attending the demo. uh, if you have any inputs or if you want to give any feedback, please send an email to the mentioned email on the screen, or if you want to contact, you can just contact on the number. Thank you so much.